Hey, what's up? Just got a brand new Spellground mat in the mail today and wanted to share my thoughts and opinions on it. I had other versions of Spellgrounds before, namely 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. And so I thought you guys would be interested in seeing my opinion on their new version 8. So this is their pink lavender, which was on pre-order in March of this year for about a month or 2 weeks or something like that. And the pricing was, I believe, $75 before tax and shipping. After tax and shipping, I think it came out to be about 90 something dollars, 92 or 93. So it's not a very cheap mat, but it's not very expensive either. Considering that buying it from them directly from Casa Brian, or sorry, Casa Brain, Casa Brain Games is the cheapest way to get it. Once you hit the secondary market, these tend to go for 1.5 to 2 times the price generally. So I recommend generally just buying it straight from them. But yeah, anyways, so this is their version 8. What they did different about this version, I believe, is that they laser cut the edge, and then they, by laser cutting it, I think they also burnt the edges, so that way it doesn't fray. And they have a bit of a different backing than their usual backing. So yeah, let's go ahead and check it out. And then I have version 6 and 7 on my on hand with me, so we can make a bit of a comparison to those other versions also. All right, so if you ever bought Spellgrounds before, it comes into really simple packaging, just a Ziploc bag and their information card on the mat itself. So here's the info card if you want to take a look at it. Here's their information and their website. So yeah, going to their website is the best place to buy the mat. If you follow them on Facebook or I think Twitter, they also kind of give you a heads up of when their pre-orders open up and all that jazz, or when their drops happen, essentially. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. So the mat is the lavender pink, and I think the ink they're using is burgundy or something like that, some sort of dark wine-looking color. I forget what the ink name was. I don't think it says on the card itself. Yeah, it does not. But yeah, that's the ink color, is some sort of like burgundy or wine, dark purple. Yeah, I'm gonna get that one wrong. I don't remember what the ink color was. But yeah, so far, the mat looks pretty good. It feels nice. Here's the backing. So on first sort of opinion on it, the mat itself sort of resembles version 2 in terms of how there's a bit of like stretch marks along the surface of the mat itself. You can kind of see it, or like they're not fold marks, but like you can kind of see these marks right here, these particular lightning looking lines that kind of look like version 2s in that sense. Other than that, the feel feels pretty soft. What I do like about it so far is if you put your finger across the mat and go back and forth, you do not feel the ink. The ink definitely feels like it's been burnt in or completely pressed in to the fabric. So unlike the other Spellgrounds, some of the older versions, what happens is if you play or you rub your finger or you rub your cards along the ink, it will eventually scrape off the ink or fray off the ink. And this one doesn't feel like that would happen. So it definitely feels like the 7, where the ink is basically just pressed into the mat or burnt into the mat, rather than just sitting on top of the fabric itself. It seems like it's integrated into the actual fabric, so that's kind of nice. The edges are unstitched. Like I said, they laser burnt it, so you can kind of see the edging is a little bit more yellow than the actual backing. The backing is more of a beige color, not completely white and not completely beige, just kind of somewhere in between there. But the edge is more yellow looking, namely because it's been lasered off, and that's kind of like the yellowing is basically a sign of it being burnt. So that's a yellowing on there. The edge does feel a little rough. You put your fingers across it and you just do this. It definitely feels kind of sharp, actually. The edging doesn't look like it would fray, but it doesn't feel very like nice and smooth. Unlike my version 6 feels really smooth along the edge, and I'll bring that out in a second, and we'll make some comparisons. Okay, so that's the mat itself. So far, pretty nice color. I like the color. I like the ink. The backing feels like a different type of fabric, maybe a different type of microfiber fabric. Not too sure, or more of a cloth fabric. Not super microfiber, but it's got more of a fuzz feeling to it. Not that it matters all that much. I prefer a darker backing, namely so it doesn't get dirty, but rarely do you ever open this thing up anyways. People usually play with half of it open like this. So that way the back never really touches the table anyways, so I guess that doesn't really matter too much. All right, so let's take a look at some other versions and compare it. Let me fold this up real quick. I think it folds this way. All right, so we'll move this to the side. So let's take a look at version 6 here. This is version 6. This is the Catalina version 6. And I had this for quite a few years. This one came out in 2020, so it's quite old. But yeah, so with the version 6, you can kind of see the backing is more, it's like a completely different backing. It doesn't feel soft, it feels pretty coarse. And it frayed a little bit, not like, I guess it's got a little bit of, what do you call it? Fabric buildup. You know, the stuff that you can kind of get in the laundry machine, I guess. So you need a bit of lint roller. I guess there's lint buildup, I guess you would call it. With any cloth mat, you're gonna have lint buildup anyways, so that's just kind of something you have to clean yourself. But in comparison, comparison-wise, the ink on the 7 for sure. Like if you put your finger across like the library and the graveyard, you can definitely feel the ink is sitting on top of the fabric, and that eventually over time it does come off a little bit, or it does rub off a little bit, where the 6, or sorry, the 8 here does not. So that's the one thing I like about the 6 over the 7 so far. The backing for the 6 I definitely like a lot better. Namely, just this type of backing feels like it's more of an actual backing. I don't know how to describe that. The edges on the 7 feels a lot nicer too. You don't have that laser cut feeling. It doesn't scratch your hands when you kind of put your fingers across and do that, kind of rubbing it. So that's what I like about the 6 a little bit more. The 6 doesn't feel as soft, or it feels a little more fuzzier. The 6, the 7, or the 8 feels a lot more smoother. Feels a little bit more similar to the version 2s in terms of look. The 7 doesn't have any of those the 6 doesn't have any of those stretch mark looks on it. However, if you leave it forward for a time, it will wrinkle up like how you see my mat is, and I've tried to iron it out. That hasn't gone quite completely flat like it was back then. So the creases kind of stay with the 6, where the 8, I don't know if the creases will stay, but it looks like if you iron this particular one out, it might actually become flat, where the 6 does not stay like that. But then again, this is an older mat. It's about 4 years old now, so yeah. All right, so let's take a look at also the 7 here. So this is the version 7. You can kind of compare it here. So version 7 is actually a lot more shinier. It's got more of a metallic look to it. 6 is more matted for sure. There's like no shine to it. Similar to the version 6, there's no real shine to it. Maybe at different light angles, you can kind of see a little bit on the 6. For sure, the 7 though feels a little bit more shinier. All right, so with the 7, It's similar to the 6 where the ink feel like it's burnt in or pressed into into the fabric itself. And so I don't think you really have to worry about the ink flaking off over time, which is nice. The 7 feels a lot more smoother. The only issue with it is if you go against the grain, it leaves grain marks, or it leaves like the fabric marks. You can kind of see here. If you put your hand, or you play against, or you play with your cards with the grain, it feels super smooth. But if you go against the grain, then it doesn't feel that great. So that's the one thing I didn't like about the 7. The 7 also, this is the second batch. So the problem with the 7 is that the backing and the front came apart. And so with the 7, starting with the 7, they started to stitch the edges, which I don't particularly care for. I think it ruins the look a little bit, and I don't really like the feeling of the stitch edges. That's just my opinion. And obviously with the version 2 batch, this is their first time doing stitch edges, so it doesn't look that great in my opinion either. I think the newer versions of the version 7, like the batch 2 or batch 3 and 4, they improve on the stitching a little bit, so it looks a little bit nicer. Where the one I have here, the stitching does kind of looks like an afterthought more. So I don't really care for the stitching on the 7. The backing to the 7 is more of this white material. Feels okay. It feels not as soft as version 8 and not as great as version 6. I definitely like the backing to 6 a little bit better. So yeah, with the 7, probably my least favorite of the modern ones. It does look nice though. Like if you leave it open and everything, it definitely looks nice and feels really soft. It's just got a couple points against it for the stitch edges. I don't particularly care for the backing as much, and the fact that if you play against the grain, it doesn't feel that great. But yeah, in terms of like thickness and whatnot, the 7's probably the most thin out of all of them. Here, I can put them side by side so you can kind of see it. Obviously, the 8 is new, so it's got a bit of that poof and that fluffiness to it, where 7 is extraordinarily flat. And then again, I had this in my drawers for a few years now, I think like 2 years or so. And then the 6 feels kind of similar to the 8, but it's also quite old matte, so it's not as poofy as it was when it was brand new. But yeah, you can kind of see the thickness there. All right, so let's take a look at it against another mat. So this is the Pyramid mat, another fabric mat, another company here. You can kind of see the colors. I wanted a color similar somewhere between this. When Spellground wasn't doing that, I had another version 6, but I think it was just the lavender color or the lilac color. I didn't particularly like the lilac version 6, so I sold that one off a while back. Problem with that one is the material didn't feel that great. The material felt like it was really rough, really coarse material, and then the coloring was a little off. It said it was lilac, but it looked like more of a really light pink color. At certain, when you angle it in the light, it looked really pinkish. It didn't really look like lilac. Where this one actually kind of looks like a pink lavender, which is kind of a nice color, versus the lilac version. I think the original lilac from V3 or V4, I believe, that was a pretty nice color. But the new lilac I did not like that much, so I sold that one off a while back. But yeah, this color I like, and this one, I forgot what exact color it was. It's been like a year or two since I've had it. But same thing with the version 6 here, because I think picked these both around the same time. This one, the inking feels like it's sitting on top of the material, and it does flake off after a bit of use. So that's the only thing I didn't like about the Pyramid mat. And I also don't like the stitching also, and the backing is kind of same with the 7. I don't really care for the backing all that much. It doesn't feel that great. It still slides on the table. Whereas the 6, if you lay it flat on the table and you open it all the way up, it doesn't slide that much because the material in the back is a little it's got more of a rubber feeling to it. I think I like that. The fact that it feels more like a rubber mat or rubber backing rather than just a pure cloth backing. These ones feel like they're like the carpet backing. If you ever pick up carpet and you feel it on the back, that's what it feels like. And this one, with the version 8, the backing feels more or less kind of like both microfiber cloth, both on the front and the back, which is kind of nice. So the backing is kind of nice, but it's not gonna sit when you probably sit it flat on the table. It's probably gonna move around just because it doesn't have that much friction or that sort of like what rubber would feel like when you put it on the table, where the 6 does. So the 6 doesn't move around as much. But yeah, so there you go, guys. That's kind of like the overview of the version 8. I haven't really used it, obviously, but with given my experience with the playmats, I think I would rank this pretty high. In terms of the feel, the color, the backing is pretty nice. The main con about it is going to be the edge. I don't really like the feel of the edge all that much, but it still, I think, is better than the stitch edges. I'm not a huge fan of stitch edges, as you can kind of see here. The version 7 and the pyramid, they both have stitch edges. I don't particularly care for them. I think the stitches kind of make the mat look a little off, and especially when you slide your cards off the mat, sometimes it gets caught onto the stitching, which I don't particularly like all that much. Only the version 7 material has that issue with the going against the grain and with the grain issue. I guess I don't know what really to call that. It may or may not be an issue, but it definitely has that where if you go against the grain, it feels kind of rough. The pyramid mat doesn't really have that issue. Version 6 here doesn't really have that issue. It sort of does, but it's not really that as noticeable. Then again, it's probably because I've used this mat for so long that it probably just kind of after use it flattened itself out or whatever. So and then with the 6 here, same thing, doesn't have that against the grain issue either, which is kind of nice. So I'd probably would rate it pretty high up there. Anyways, that's basically it. So hopefully this helps you guys if you're looking to buy a version 8. I do think they're pretty good. I mean, I think their technique for the inking and the backing looks pretty good. Looks like there's zero chance of it fraying. The material here doesn't look like it's gonna fray. What might happen though is it might get a lint buildup, so you may have to delint it. But that's with any soft cloth playmat. Lint builds up, and you're gonna have to buy a lint roller. You're gonna roll off the lint on that. But the backing doesn't look like it will come off, and it doesn't look like there's any issues with it fraying. Even though I like the backing for the 6 does have a little bit of issue with fraying, where I don't, obviously you can't see any here because I kind of cut off all the stray fray marks. Obviously these are stitched, so they're not gonna have any issue with fraying, but you have to like stitch edges. If you don't like stitch edges, then obviously these are no good either. But I think this is a good compromise, like a good middle ground between the version 6 and the version 7. It's kind of like a hybrid between both of them, and I think that's pretty good. My main gripe is just I don't particularly care for the super soft fabric backing. I would prefer it be more rubber like the 6, but this is still better than the 7. The edges are worse than the 6, but the inking and the feel of the actual mat itself is probably better than the 7. Not as smooth and good as the 7, or sorry, the 6. So it's not as smooth as 7, but a little bit softer than 6. Obviously with the 7, like I mentioned before, it has that grain thingy, but other than that, it's kind of like a nice compromise between the two mats. Anyways, that's it. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two, and yeah, I would definitely pick up the version 8s if you can, directly from their website. Don't buy it on eBay because you're going to be paying basically double the price of these particular mats, unless there's a color that you really want that they don't make anymore, or a version of like 2, 3, or 4 that in the back then if you didn't catch on to those, you can buy those. But those, I would, from my opinion, I would probably skip 4. 4's probably got the worst fraying issue out of all of them. 3 is pretty good, but I don't really remember too much about 3. 5 I kind of skipped, but 5 I didn't. My friend has a version 5, and I didn't really like the surface of 5 all that much, so I'd probably skip on 5 too. 6 is being so far my favorite. Obviously, I had this mat and I haven't sold it, so that's saying something. So 6 is pretty good, kind of hard to come by now. I think they're like 4 years old. So 7, I'd probably skip also. I mean, I know they made some. There's some hit and misses with the 7s, different colors. They had a couple different versions of the 7 itself. I got the second batch, so like I said, I don't really care for it either. But so far, I would say if you're gonna pick up a Spellground of recent, I would go with the 6 or the 8. Skip the 5 probably. Skip the 4, and 3 and 2 are really good, but very expensive. Anyways, guys, that's it, and I will see you guys next time.